Hi guitarlings, this is Gray at Hub Guitar. Thanks for tuning in today to study the classical guitar tune Lágrima. Lágrima is a great tune to learn if you're just beginning out on the guitar. There are a couple moments in the tune that are a bit on the more intermediate side, especially when it comes to doing bar chords and things like that. But what's very inviting about this tune is the opening four measures are pretty easy. Most beginners can work those out, and that's kind of a nice invitation, if you will, after you've studied those first four measures, to kind of pull yourself further and further into the tune. The first half of Lágrima is in the major key, which makes it sound kind of happy and nostalgic, and the second half switches to the minor key, making it sound much more stark and bold. The form for Lágrima is the first two lines, measures 1 through 8, are going to be played one time. And then the next two lines, that's measures 9 through 16, are going to be played one time. Now at the end, you'll see a DC al fine. What that means is you're going to return to the beginning. That's what the DC means. It's for da capo, or to the head. You're going to return to the beginning, and this time you're going to stop when you see the fine sign on measure 8. So first 8, second 8, then repeat the first 8 only, and you're done. Let's talk about how to finger the opening four measures of Lágrima. We're going to put our index finger on the second fret of the fourth string, and we're going to put our pinky finger on the fourth fret of the first string. That's the little string. And we're going to pluck both of those two together. Now, it's very important that you observe good fingering, and this tune is no exception. What I suggest you do is that you play the entire first four measures using only these two fingers until you reach the very end of measure 2, which I'll show you in a second. So index and pinky, and then you're going to pluck the open B string, and now you're going to slide up a little bit. The pinky slides up 1 to fret 5, but the index finger has to slide up 2 to get to fret 4. And we pluck the same two strings again, and follow it with an open B string. Now we take this new shape that we've created, and we move the entire shape up 2 frets, like that. So we've got this. And then we slide that shape all the way back down to the first fret. And we play the same pattern, but now it turns into a bigger B7 chord. So to do that, we're going to take our third finger and press down on the second fret of the third string, and we're going to take our middle finger and put that on the second fret of the fifth string to get a full B7th chord. And that can form very naturally from that original shape. I don't have it all at once, I just sort of let it kind of fall into place as I play that chord. On the right hand, I'm going to do thumb and ring finger, followed by my middle. Thumb and ring, middle. Thumb and ring, middle. Thumb and ring, middle. Now I'm going to use my index finger, my middle finger, my thumb, and my middle finger. So I'm observing pretty carefully the fingering of the tune to make sure that my right hand doesn't get lost, because it's a lot of work already to look at the left hand, plan the left hand's fingering, so you want to have a good plan of attack for your plucking hand as well. One rule you may have heard is that the thumb can play strings 6, 5, and 4, and then you've got the index finger kind of planted on the third string, you've got the middle finger planted on the second, and you've got the ring finger planted on the first. I don't think that that matches all scenarios and all situations, so I don't like to think of it as a rule, but as a model or a guideline. It's very helpful when you're starting out so that you have some place to start with your plucking patterns. On measures 3 and 4, we see a 2-measure repeat symbol, which just means repeat the last measures of what you just did. So that's measures 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then we're going to go to measure 5. Now measure 5, right away you'll notice that there's a bar on fret 9, and it actually says a half bar. The reason we're doing a half bar is we don't want to necessarily bar across all 6 strings and spend all of that effort doing that when we don't need to. In this case, you'll see that it only uses strings 1, 2, 3, and 4. So we're just going to half bar with our index finger across strings 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, you're going to have to make sure that you can push all of those together at once. If you're struggling with that, you're going to have to spend some time getting the strength, and that's something that happens over time. As you practice the guitar, your hands physically get stronger. But make sure you have that all in place before you go forward. Then you'll see a couple more things have to happen before we can put this together. We've got to put our pinky on the 12th fret of the first string, and we've actually got to put our ring finger on the 11th fret of the 4th string. So actually, in total so far, there's really only one note that's being played by that bar, which makes the bar seem like overkill. But if you look at what's happening next, it'll make sense why we've got that bar there. Because there's more notes coming from that 9th fret. So we play outer 2 in the 9th fret, and then we slide down with our pinky 1/2 step to 11 and play the same pattern. We also have to lift up our 3rd finger. Just like that, nice and smooth. And then once we've got this little shape in here, now I'm barring across the 9th with my pinky on the 11th. I just move that shape right down to the 7th. And pluck the outer 2, followed by the 2nd string. So in total I've got this. Now I can preserve that bar even further and put my ring finger on the 9th fret now of the 4th string, and then put my pinky on the 9th fret of the 2nd string. And now I've got, and then I'm just going to give up that bar finally, and I'm going to do this little shape which reminds me of F major. By the way, I'm now on the 2nd beat of measure 6. And I've got this little sort of F major type shape. If you think about your open F chord, if you've studied that, we've got the 1st fret, the 1st fret, the 2nd fret, and the 3rd fret up here. If that's familiar to you, this might be helpful to remind yourself that that's kind of what we've got here. But anyways, it's the middle finger pressing down on the 6th fret of the 3rd string. And I like to use my index finger to press down on the 5th frets of both the 1st and 2nd string. And then we've got this little melody here, and we get that 7th fret note just by sticking our ring finger down. Like that. And then we go to a D shape. If you've learned your D major chord there, which is 2, 3, 2, and then open, that's a lot like a D major shape. It's just 2 frets higher. And that's going to be on the 4th fret. So we've got this. Now on measure 7 on the 2nd beat, I've got another F major type of shape. This time it's 3rd fret and 2nd fret. Notice I'm doing the same fingering there that I did up here. And then I'm going to switch to a little bit of a bar so I can get the B 7th chord there. I'm barring across the 2nd fret now. And all I really need to do is make sure that I get up to that B note on the 2nd fret of the 5th string. And then pluck the 3rd and 2nd strings while I've got my pinky on the 4th fret of the 2nd string. And then I'm going to a little E major to finish it off. Now this is an E major chord, so if you're more familiar with the E major chord, that's 0, 2, 2, 1, 0, 0. If you're more familiar with that, you can just go straight to that shape. But sometimes I like to just leave out fingers that aren't needed. Like in this case, we're not playing the 5th string, so I just don't put anything there. All together, we've got this. Now that may be the hardest part of Lágrima, so really practice that back and forth over and over a bunch of times. If you feel that the first 4 measures are easy and you've really got those down, definitely spend more time on measures 5, 6, 7, and 8. Don't just, go start to finish all the time. Try to distribute your time in a sort of meaningful way where you're spending more time on things that you can't do and less time on things that you can do. Now we're going to start off measure 9 with the E minor instead of E major sound. So we're going to put our index finger on the 3rd fret of the high E string. We've got some open strings there. And we've got a little melody that climbs up the E string. Make sure that as you play that melody on the high E string, you don't disturb the other strings. It's kind of easy to kill those prematurely. Make sure that you let them ring. And they should actually all be ringing right up until the last beat of measure 9. So we've got this. And then on the last beat of measure 9, we've got this bar chord across the 7th fret. It's not a super difficult bar chord, but really make sure that you're squeezing that. It might surprise you how much pressure you've got to put down to make that ring the first few times until you get used to it. So we're barring across the 7th fret with our middle finger on the 8th fret of the 3rd string, soon to be joined at the 8th fret by the ring finger, which now comes down onto the 8th fret of the 2nd string to make that kind of sound. And then we pluck the outer 2 strings to resolve that little line. Now I've got a little mixture of thirds. So this is a group of notes, it's called an interval actually, that are all separated by the musical distance of 1/3. So for example, the lower of the 2 here in the 2nd fret of the 3rd string is an A, and the upper of the 2 is a C. So if you think A, B, C, that's a third. And we're actually just following that pattern around the scale. So that's why it seems so symmetrical. It really is pretty pattern oriented. So I'm going to do 2nd fret and 1st fret of strings 3 and 2, and then play them both open before I switch to the middle 2 strings. That's string 4 and 3, and that's the 4th fret and the 2nd fret, and then down to the 2nd fret of the 4th string with the open 3rd string, and then back to the pattern I just had. So it's, and then I've got the open strings again. And then I'm going to climb all the way up to the 12th fret. Now you might be thinking, oh my gosh, that's a big jump to make up to the 12th fret. You know, music in this style is not necessarily played with a very, very strict interpretation. And it's actually a point of cadence here when we go back to this. So if you take a moment to get up here, that would sound pretty natural. Now we're at the 12th fret with our pinky on the 12th fret of the high E string. And we also have the 12th fret of the A string. I'm doing that with my ring finger. And I'm doing that so I can go to the next shape. So that's pretty easy, right? Pinky and 3rd finger, that's not too bad. But then if you go down here to the 8th fret of the 1st string, you want to put your index finger and then put your middle finger on the 9th fret of the 5th string. And then your pinky is going to go back on the 8th fret of the 2nd string. And now we go back to that familiar chord from measure 9. We're going from the 5th note of the chord up to this kind of tense note and back down. So I'm putting my ring finger onto the 9th fret of the 4th string, and then putting my pinky on the 10th fret and lifting that up. And then as soon as I play the 9th fret of the 4th string, I'm actually following through with an open B string, which happens to be the exact same note. I actually had to go back to the original score from, hundreds of years ago and check and make sure I wasn't seeing a mistake. But it's the same note. And what that does is that gives us just a moment to get back down to the open position, which we need for the next thing that we're going to do, which is going to be on measure 13. So altogether we have this. And now when I get to measure 13, I'm actually doing the same idea that we opened the tune with, except now it's been translated into the minor key. That's why it sounds so familiar. So instead of the big shape and the little shape and the little shape, I've got a little shape and a little shape and a big shape. And notice that I'm still using my index and pinky just like I did in measure 1. Compare that to this. Now I like to pause on this note. That's just sort of my own interpretation. That's on the 10th fret of the high E string. And we're basically just walking down the scale while we let the open 5th string ring for the whole measure. And now we're at measure 15. Some open strings, a D7, B7 shape again, just like from the beginning, and then a minor chord. So that's actually an E minor chord again, just in case you didn't make that connection. We just don't need the 5th string, so you can do it with one finger. Altogether, we've got this. I like to be nice and dramatic on those ending chords. after we've reached that D, C, Al fine, of course, we go back to measure 1 and play to measure 8, and then we're all done. So that's it for Lágrimas, a short and sweet tune, also very, very, very famous, and a perfect new addition for your classical guitar repertoire. That's all for today. Thanks for watching.